Okay, so first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go along and get everyone to introduce themselves one by one and tell you a bit about themselves, what they do, and then hopefully that should make us and you sort of feel more, a bit connected so you can, so we can talk a bit more about mental health because it can be quite personal and quite invasive sometimes. So first of all, my name's Jacob Bell and I'm a furniture maker. And I try to post onto social media and things, but it can be quite difficult sometimes. But yeah, that's me.
Okay. Well, my name's Leo Winstanley. I run a small business called Hand Eye Craft, which is a combination of furniture making, kind of like, not like as good as what Jacob does, but very much on a much more basic level. I do content creating. I have my own kind of website where I promote my own products as well. And there are one or two other bits and pieces, but I can't remember what they are. So I write blogs occasionally. So it's a mixture really of making things, items to sell, and also creating content around that as well.
My name's Ellis. I'm trying to get more into content creation, but my main thing is robotics. I design and build fighting robots like on Robot Wars, and literally as on Robot Wars. And I also run a little company called Wranglebox, where I sell the little motors and gearboxes for other hobbyists who want to build their own. And then professionally, I've been an electromechanical or robotics engineer for 5-6 years. And I work for myself over the last few years. So yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Alex. I do leathery stuff. And because this is a mental health talk, 4 years ago I tried to kill myself. Because that's how brutally honest we need to be sometimes. So this is I've been at Maker Central since its beginning, the very first show I was here. And then COVID hit and we all went into a big spiral and Maker Central stopped happening. And using my craft, using my leatherworking, I make videos the best I can, as we all do. And I make these for me to learn, for me to inspire, and for me to teach. I don't even sell anything anymore. I just make stuff to give away or for teaching people. That's me.
So my name's Ruth. I am one half of Kids Invent Stuff, which is a YouTube channel that brings to life kids' invention ideas. I also build stuff for brands, so I make content across most platforms, but I also build things for TV. So I build for Hannah Fry's Secret Genius of Modern Life, so bringing to life patents and old prototypes. And Jacob and Ellis and myself were on Masters of Reinvention. And yeah, a lot of my life revolves around making things to film to put on the internet.
So hopefully now you know a bit more about all of us. And now, I'm going to start with you, Leo.
Okay.
You have a physical challenge that maybe some people don't know about. So, explain what's happened.
So the reason probably why I'm here today doing what I do is 7 years ago, a couple of weeks ago, I was involved in a horrific car crash. In essence, it nearly killed me. There's no other way to describe it. I suffered what the hospital describes as life-changing injuries. I was dominant right-handed. I lost the use of my right arm and hand. I suffered nerve damage down my right side and also developed chronic neuropathic pain. Prior to the crash, I was a professional musician, I was a professional piano player, and I was a school teacher. So literally, in the blink of an eye, my life changed forever. There's no other way to describe that. As a result of that, or as a consequence of that, I suffered a catastrophic breakdown in my mental health. I did everything wrong. So everything you're told not to do, I did. So I put on the mask. I pretended everything was okay. I'm sorry if it's a bit deep, this, but I think it's probably important that I do share these. I hid everything from my family. I masked stuff with humor, and it was a very, very difficult time. It was actually my partner, Pam, who made me go to the doctors, and I opened up and broke down literally in tears in the doctors, and I couldn't even articulate anything. But the doctor said, "Are you open to getting help?" And that was the first step. So I couldn't even say yes, and I nodded. And that was the starting point, really, on a mental health journey. I was subsequently diagnosed with complex PTSD, mixed anxiety depression disorder, okay? And it was actually in a session with a counselor who suggested maybe I should start and learn a new skill, because all I was doing in my life was beating myself up for things I could no longer do. That was the reality of it, really. So when I came back the following week with woodworking, I could see the kind of bemused look on the lady's face. Like I said, well, no, I'm up for the challenge. I had to teach myself to be left-handed. I don't think you realize how awful your non-dominant hand is until it is the only hand that you've got left to use. So I had to teach myself about coordination, about learning self to left-handed, and I wanted to learn a new skill. And that's where the woodwork journey started, really, for me. So it started off with literally, I had a leaky garage, making little candle holders. Candle holders became chopping boards. Chopping boards became other bits and pieces, and instead of just gifting them to friends and family, it became a little bit of, should I sell some of these? And that's where things started. And it helped, certainly helped in my mental health journey. I always describe it, and I think it's really important to say this early, is people describe battling depression. People say, I'm battling anxiety, I'm battling PTSD. Please don't use that term, because a battle really infers having a winner and a loser, okay? And mental health's not about winning and losing. It's about managing those conditions. And in a lot of circumstances, it's learning to live with them. I acknowledge that this is my journey now for the rest of my life. It's very difficult to comprehend that at times, but I think it's really important that we use the correct terminology. Now, that's not from a psychiatrist or a psychologist's point of view. That's just from my point of view. But it's like learning to manage these conditions, learning to live with these conditions, learning to be open. That's why I'm sat here today. There's no way, even up to a few years ago, I only really opened up about this to strangers, maybe about 18 months ago, 2 years ago. So I'd like to thank Jacob for inviting me today to talk about this. Happy to discuss things later on with folk as well if you don't feel like a public environment's the right place to be talking about it. But that's kind of where I'm at in my journey now. Okay.
Thank you.
Right.
I know it's really hard to share stuff like that, especially, in front of a big crowd, but I really appreciate that.
Okay.
Another question I have, Alex, did your making journey, as a creator, did that start before or after your mental health issues?
So my mental health issues go back a long time. So I had 2 reconstructive surgeries to my hip and was bedridden for about 8 months. And during that time, I took up jewelry making and just jump rings and making chainmail and things like that because I could do it laid down. And then what I realized was I'm not going to be going out hiking up mountains anymore in my spare time. I didn't really do that anyway. But I'm not going to be going on the big long walks with a dog or doing the more sort of physically active things that I would be doing. So during that period of recovery, rest, and sort of trying to get to understand that your life isn't going to be the same as it was. And it's nowhere near as horrific as a life-changing sort of instant like that. But when you lose a certain physical attribute that you're used to doing, I was a martial artist for all of my life. And then not being able to stand up for longer than half an hour without being in searing pain, it takes its toll here. Never mind this hurts. I'm used to this hurting. It's when this hurts. So I turned to crafting to keep this active and these active when I couldn't keep the rest of myself as an active person. And what I learned was you can chase that dopamine. You are following that win because you're learning a new skill and you go, today I'm going to learn how to do this. And then by the end of the day, you may have made a rubbish version of it. And then by the end of the week, you've got better at it. And then in a year's time, next thing you know, you're on stage at Maker Central. It's building up to that, to a point where the front of your brain is focusing on not cutting your hand off with this sharp knife or not stabbing yourself in the finger with this needle, whereas the back of your brain is trying to deal with those issues, the life-changing, the why am I so sad, those points of view. And I feel like making things helps, but I also think that there could be a dark side to it, because when I had I call it a blip, because it was a blip in my life. When I had my blip and got to the end of what I could see as my road, I was the busiest I've ever been making stuff. I had orders coming in left, right, and center. I was working with another really talented maker. We were doing stuff. Everything seemed really happy and positive. But that's the thing with depression. That's the thing with negative mental health. You know what mask you're wearing, and you know yourself deep down if you're wearing that mask. And if you feel like you're wearing that mask more than you're not, speak to somebody, speak to your friend. Leah said it like, go and get help. And I know it's like one of the biggest hurdles in mental health is admitting you have a problem. You're the big, strong guy that can do it. You're the strong, independent woman that can do it. We all need help. And COVID taught us a lot about ourselves. And some of it wasn't great.
Yeah. And so in both of those situations, that's an example of how making and creating can have a negative and positive effect on your mental health. And I know that being an online content creator like you, Ruth, you could go into that feeling absolutely great, confident, happy, and after a while, things can change.
Yeah, I think as well. So the reason that I started to make content is because I wanted to inspire other people. And I know it's a reason that lots of people film what they do and they put it online, is because, particularly for me, growing up, I didn't see people like me making, and I wanted to show more of that. A lot of the skills that I use in the workshop, welding, they're definitely slightly more male-dominated. And so kind of part of my role in what I do is I want to share that with people. But obviously, that can end up with some interesting feedback. And I think it's something that a lot of people don't think about and I think a lot of businesses feel that they have to make and share content. So I think sometimes people feel like content now is just part of, whether you're a maker or whether you have another business, you should be online, you should be sharing stuff. And I think there's a lot of hidden stuff that comes with that, because I think sometimes you can end up with, well, I have a theory. So if anyone posts online and you start to get negative comments, it's actually a really successful thing, because it means your audience has gone past just your friends and family. You are reaching a brand new audience. And quite frankly, if you want your content to do really well and do numbers and make a career out of it, you're going to have to deal with that. And that's something that I learned quite early on, is actually this thing that I wanted to do and this thing that I wanted to make my career involved me getting negative comments back. And a lot of it is how you deal with it. And I used to sit and I'd see friends who, they'd say, oh, well, I never read the comments. I had friends who were on TV and they're like, I never watched the show. And I'm like, how? How can you not do that? And I get it. Because if you don't know, it doesn't bother you. And I think it's about, if you are wanting to put content online, I think it's about what are those things you put in place to protect your mental health. Mm-hmm. So from day one on Kids Invent Stuff, the first person that looked at comments was Sean, who was my business partner, and he would filter them out. Occasionally, he'd send me screenshots of really funny ones before he'd delete them. But he did filter out a lot of the stuff, so I never got to see it. Now, I feel like I'm much more robust when it comes to that. A lot of the time, I just think, great, you're bringing my engagement up. Your issue with a woman in the workshop, or like, that is great for my algorithm, thank you. But it's about how you build that in, because I know for a lot of people, that's something that they really struggle with. It's like people just directly shouting at them when they put up content.
So being a content creator, you must have to manage your sort of feelings towards what people are saying and manage, basically, back to what you said, being a female in a very male-dominated industry.
I think as well, though, it's not just necessarily, yes, there's the comments, but I think there's another side to social media that we don't always talk about, which is like the numbers. And particularly if you are really proud of a piece of content and you put it online and it doesn't do that well, or you have one that does do really well, or I think there's a whole thing, and you can end up just chasing that and creating content to get the views. and actually you end up losing that essence of why you started. And I think that's something that is, as often as you see channels grow, you can sometimes see a massive drop in someone's mental health because they're starting to chase those likes, those comments, those follows.
I can relate to that because none of my social media or YouTube channel or anything is monetized. So I found myself quite often looking at the YouTube app and looking at all my stats, and sort of you see this really long bar of where you have to reach to get to that monetized level, and it's the tiny blue dot at one end because you've got such a long way to go, and it makes you feel like you've gone backwards rather than forwards, and that has affected me.
I think as well, there's that saying, isn't there, like an overnight success is like 10 years work or something, and I think that often does happen, is that people will see someone, and everyone has their own journey when it comes to making content, and for some people it can take 2 or 3 videos. For other people, they can work solidly for a decade. And that doesn't mean that content isn't good. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's the thing that's tricky, is because if you're building your self-worth on the views and the comments, then actually it's really easy for that to really affect your mental health.
We've spoke about online content creation, but there's other sides to making. We've got being a hobby and it being your full-time job. And quite often, if someone has a hobby that they enjoy so much, they will often aspire to have it as their full-time job. Mm-hmm. So turning that from a hobby to a job can be quite stressful, especially when you do it so much that you get absolutely sick of it and there's no way out. Has anyone felt that?
I mean, that would be me to a T with the robot stuff. So I
was
started,
literally looking at you.
Yeah, I mean, building robots is sort of my entire identity, and from my mid-teens, I was the guy that builds fighting robots. It was essentially as simple as that for a long time. And then there came, I think it was around 2014, I had a project which required a particular type of component, and I thought, rather than make this one-off for me, I'll make a batch of 100 in China and see if I can, sell them to some of my mates and where it might be. And before I knew it, I had a little business. Fast forward 5 or 10 years of that kind of being in the background and a lot of life changes, but now that is what I do full-time, having gone through being a full-time employee as well. And yet, for me, the lines are blurry between mental health and making things in general, or just creative output. And it's my creative output, and I've never really figured out whether I'm mentally in a better position if I'm making lots of things, or if and therefore that's making me feel good, or if I can't make things, that makes me feel bad, so I feel bad, so I don't make things, and it kind of goes both ways. Yeah. And that kind of imbalance in my case, I've never really struggled to be inspired. I don't know if that makes me lucky or not. I don't know about you guys, but I'm rarely in a situation where I'm not having ideas and these things that I feel like I could do. But making the leap between thinking, oh, that'd be a fun thing to do, and actually doing any of them, just any of these things, and making any of them happen, when you're not in a great mental space, I find I can have 150, 300 ideas, but I can barely make a quarter of one go if I'm in a bad place. And that makes me feel worse, and that spiral is something that I find myself in. And when what you do for money, or instead of a real job, in my case, is design and make products for people to be able to make their own mini robots and stuff, if your creative output is directly linked to that, and that then takes that hit and that spiral, obviously that then has compounding effects that go far beyond your creative output. It becomes your income, it becomes your stability in life. Yeah. And I'm sure that's something you can relate to as well, because you're in a similar situation. So it's inherently linked, and I'm still figuring out whether it's chicken and egg or egg and chicken with creative output, mental health, creative output.
Yeah. I absolutely enjoy my job.
Jacob likes wood.
I do.
That was a regular joke on this TV show.
I love working with wood, but there have been times where I've felt like I haven't been enjoying what I've been doing. And I think that's when it was a hobby. Anything I wanted to do, anything I wanted to make, I could do it. I could just run into the workshop, have it done in as long or as little as it takes. But as soon as it's a commission for someone else, as soon as it's not your own design, not your own way of doing things, or not your own
Not your
job,
money.
all of a sudden, I feel like I'm not doing this for me.
Mm-hmm.
So you kind of have to learn to separate your hobby from your job if you go that extra step and make it your job. And it can go through to most crafts, really. I'm sure you all can agree.
So my day job was selling leather and finishes and tools to people in a retail environment, was doing all their social media content, was coming to events like this and craft shows and Comic-Cons and all the rest of it. And then I would be taking orders and doing leatherwork as a business. And there was a Christmas Eve where I was finishing up and I had to hand deliver, because it wouldn't make it there for Christmas, an archery quiver, which was hand-dyed, hand-laced, and lined with rabbit fur. So quite a complex piece of thing. And I delivered it at 7 p.m. on Christmas Eve for somebody's Christmas present. And it's at that point I went, I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't fun. This isn't helping me to relax. This isn't helping me decompress, de-stress. This is more stress. And now I've got the added pressure of it's somebody's Christmas present in the morning. Is the glue going to be set? Have I pulled the lace tight enough? Is the die set? So I stopped. And I think I stopped for about 6 months. And just went, I'm all right. I don't want to do it anymore.
I had a big call to make, because obviously I had a significant period away from work. I was off for nearly 2 years with physical rehabilitation and stuff. But I returned to teaching and realized reasonably quickly I couldn't cope. And that's it was really eating into the demons. So the hobby had become a little bit more than that at that time. It became almost kind of like a part-time enterprise, if you like. So I had a judgment call to make, really. And I think what had happened, I described myself living with a disability. I will be open with it, I'm unreliable. I couldn't say for certain yesterday that was going to be here today. It's just one of those things you kind of have to. And if you're an employee and your employer, and you recognize that you are very unreliable for no fault of your own, then it presents its difficulties. So I think for someone in my position, if you've got the opportunity to go into self-employment, to become your own boss, then that definitely has its benefits. I can dictate my own time. I'm fortunate enough that I built a workshop in the back garden, so I literally come out the back door and my workplace is there. And the benefits far outweigh the negatives on that. The negative side of stuff becomes when you become your own boss, it's the financial implications of the money coming in, and do you spread yourself too thinly? That's why I'm not all in on YouTube. I'm not all in as a maker, because things generally take 30-40% longer for me to make something, and I can't charge 30-40% more than other makers purely because it took me that much longer because I'm a disabled person. The world doesn't work like that. Let's be honest. I'm honest with that. So I made the conscious decision to make my business kind of multifaceted, really. So YouTube is a part of that, and ad revenue, you take sponsorships, affiliates, that kind of thing. Making, that's another part. Developing my own products, like my own wood wax, that kind of thing. So kind of having different pots on the go is better for me, because it means I'm not all in on one thing. It is stressful. I think as a content creator as well, and most people who do create content in here will nod their head, is when do you actually switch off? If you're watching the telly in the evening, Pam will tell me, how many times am I checking my analytics, am I checking the comments, am I replying to things,
And it's a double
Am I
whammy, 'cause
receiving
if
an
you're
email?
not, then it's the guilt for not, as
There
well
you go.
as not
Yeah,
actually
because
doing.
if you don't, exactly, and you feel I'm missing out on things. So it has its pressures in that sense, and it's about learning to manage those. It's a lifelong, learning process. Something that's going to be a lifetime of study for me on that one. I do think, though, it's certainly helped me in a positive way in regards to my mental health. There are negative aspects to it, but the way I've kind of moved in my life, particularly in the last 3 years, maybe 3 or 4 years, has certainly benefited me. It's not all negative about doing what we do. There's loads of great stuff to it as well.
So, because obviously we've all spoken about how what we do affects our mental health, what exactly do you guys do to actually manage your mental health and actually improve it?
I'll tell you mine
It's just
straight
a
away.
load of blank faces like we don't.
I go into the workshop, but I don't film anything.
Yep.
Yeah.
You know what I
Yep.
mean? So I'll just go, and that thing that I've been meaning to make for ages, I'm not bothered about all the
Give
mistakes
yourself
I'm
the
going to
room.
make. You know, literally, I'll go in with a cup of tea and just have it, and that's my day off. You know, like, I know it sounds a bit bizarre, but that is great. It's like cathartic for me, because it means that it's returning to my hobby. Do you know what you were saying
Yeah.
before about distinguishing between it being your hobby and being your job? So my hobby is my job, but my hobby is also my hobby as well. Does that make sense?
Kind of, in a
Yeah,
roundabout
in
way.
a roundabout sort of way, yeah.
I think I can try and tie something to that as a concept as well, that I feel like in a way I'm quite lucky because I've always had a gut feeling, a kind of a confidence level in what I'm able to do and able to achieve. And quite often I underestimate the time involved in doing something, and therefore I'm a little bit late to certain shows and stuff, whatever, don't know what we're talking about. But I've always had that kind of gut feeling, which is, you know, I think X, Y, Z is possible, and I think I can do it, and I'm fairly confident in that. And one of the experiences I had a few years ago, I had a wobble that was a fairly serious one about 4 years ago, and it was multifaceted. But one of the facets was I had a project at work in that case where one of the elements of the project I was trying to work on was particularly difficult, and I had agreed to the client 6 months prior, yeah, I think I can make that work, based entirely on gut feeling, and I think that's possible. And then it came up to actually do it, and I was going through some other stuff as well, and I couldn't figure it out. And I could not solve this problem, and it took me weeks to get past this problem.
Wow.
And it was just one of those things where I thought, wow, this is actually one of the first times my gut feeling's been wrong. I thought I could do a thing, and actually I can't. I can't solve this. And that really rocked me. It was one of the first, and actually to date, one of the only times where I was wrong about what I can actually pull off. And then I did, a few weeks later, eventually crack it. But in the meantime, I went off a bit of a cliff. So again, that kind of tie between creative output and what you can actually achieve being directly related to mental health and which way that goes is something that I can feel quite strongly. And I forgot how I was going to link that back to your original point. But anyway, it's a particular nugget of experience that I've had where, if that kind of gut check gets really badly checked, then... we talked about how we deal with it today. Sorry, that was the idea. I honestly, get in the workshop and solve one of those things that I'm pretty sure will work. Like, you know, I think if I take an M10 bolt and put some details in the end, I can make that turn into a little fighting robot spinner thing. And actually, I had one of those where it didn't work, but I never really believed in it. And I had to set the backup plan, and I pulled that off, and I felt great for a few hours. So I guess go and try and do a thing that you're pretty sure you can do. Yeah.
So the thing is, we all, maybe what we do stresses us out and gets us down, and but still that exact thing that we love doing is still there, and just putting it in its raw form, just creating for the sake of creating, can really get you back out of a rut that you fall into. It really helps.
I like to try to learn a new skill, learn a new technique. Just make, like Leo was saying, like, go and make something for yourself. Don't film it, and if it's rubbish, keep it as a lesson or throw it away. It doesn't matter, but go and make something for yourself. Make that little thing that I reckon I could do this. Go and do it, because that's how you started. Most of us, I would say, that's, you know, we've had this inspiration. I can make that better than how much they're charging for it online, or whatever that thing is that pulls you into making. And find the roots, go back to what brought you that happiness. And yes, we're following dopamine, we're trying to get the quick wins. We've got much bigger, broader, better skill sets at this point in our journeys as makers. But if we can get back to a point of, oh, wow, look at this, that excitement, you're chasing that excitement. And yeah, there's negative aspects to quick wins and things as well, but in general, if you're doing this day in, day out, you want to be able to find that thing that keeps you motivated and keeps you inspired. And for me, genuinely, I'll go and, order a new tool that I've not seen before. Get on Temu, search the thing that you want to do, and find the most rubbish tools on there. And when you get them, I got one the other day, and it's these little like wing dividers, and they're adorably cute. It cost me like £3 from Temu, and I was so pleased with them. I made a video about it.
The retail therapy, is that what you're describing as a solution?
No.
I do that with shoes, but yeah, carry on.
Yeah, tools, laser cutters, leather tools. Yeah. But it was learning. So I bought a load of rubbish tools from Temu. I'm going to give this a go. Let's see what it is. I already know what these ones do. I did a video. I made some wallets for Soapy and Resin Jewels because I made them some matching wallets. It was really cute. Didn't really film it. And saying to my partner, like, I'm not going to film this bit because the amount of videos you've got of me sat there hand sewing, I'm bored of watching them. I'm bored of editing them. I'm bored of posting them. But I just did it because I was making it for my friends that wanted the thing. So make the thing for yourself. Find the passion. Go back to where it is, especially if you've been doing it as a business or like saying it's a hobby that's building a little bit more momentum. Take a step back and just go, what is it I love about leatherwork, woodwork, metalwork, welding stuff together? Like, what is it that drives you to do that? And just do it, but for yourself.
Of course, making stuff and not filming it. It's the maker's dream. Love that. Definitely the way to recovery. I think the other side to it is I spent a lot of time trying to work out what were the things that triggered me, or where was this coming from? Why did that particular comment? Mm-hmm. Why was it that particular thing? And then once I'd worked out what they were, like, how was I going to manage that? So, for example, one of the things that really helped was kind of sitting down and being like, but what, like, why does that particular comment, is that something that I can address within myself? Does it actually matter? And so there's certain platforms where I've just switched notifications off. If I want to look at comments, that's fine. If I don't, that's also fine. I also try and take a step back. So on some of the platforms, I schedule content, which means that I'm not in the app all the time. So I'm trying to take that time away from that. And I also gave myself the permission to not have to answer every comment and to not have to, like, get involved in that conversation. I don't have to persuade to change someone's mind if someone thinks that about what I'm doing, or, I will happily wade in someone's comments for someone else. Let me know. Always love that. But also, I feel like in an industry where I am already a smaller slice of that, it is not my job to go in there and fight for that. I don't have to do that as well. My job is already made slightly trickier by the fact that people have preconceived ideas of what I can and can't do and will hold me to much higher expectations anyway. But it's not my job. I don't have to go in there and wade in there. That's not me. I can just go and enjoy making stuff. I can put it on the internet, and if people like it, great. And if they don't...
So do you feel like there is pressure from everyone watching you on YouTube that you should be this sort of advocate for female makers?
I think there is a group of female makers who do feel like the pressure is on us. And do you know what we all do? We all talk and bitch. That's what we do, is we all have conversations and we all, in a safe space, talk about it, and then we can go on and have a lovely time. And I think that's the thing is, we said about talking earlier, I think it's really important. And a lot of the time, I just feel really grateful that I get to do this as a job. I love this stuff. I love making. Filming it's a pain, isn't it? Like, we all love making. It's the filming bit of the content that's, But we are so lucky, and I feel really lucky that I get to explore and all the rest of it. And I think sometimes those triggers reflect more on me. Like, why does that trigger me? And so sometimes it's worth looking back and being like, is that something I can fix within me? And if not, it doesn't matter. Do you know what I mean? I feel like I'm having made content now for a long time, I feel like I'm very much getting at peace with it.
Ruth, how did you feel about it in the earlier days when you were trying to grow your channel?
Interestingly, I think some of it came from the fact that I felt like I had to prove what I could do, if that makes sense. So a lot of the times, the comments that I found triggering were the ones where a lot of the things that we do on the channel, we've built over 100 kids' invention ideas. We've done everything from fiberglassing to building giant, 7-foot dinosaurs that mop the floor, popcorn doorbells, all sorts of different skills, some of which both Sean and I had never done before. And people would look at it, having done that skill for a long time, and be like, oh, you should have done that. You should have. And I think some of that is also, if I got really comfortable with showing mistakes and showing failures, because no one, if you don't show that, people don't get permission to also fail and also join in. And so for me, I kind of was like, I think I have a thick enough skin. Having done it for a while, at first I was like, oh, this is weird. It's like you wouldn't go up to a person and say some of the stuff people write online, right? The stuff that gets DM'd, poor Emily gets to see some of that as well. You just would not do that.
Nope.
And I feel quite lucky that I have thick skin, and so I'm quite happy. I will film the mistakes, I will put it on. I don't feel like I have to prove myself anymore, because I think it's their, if they have an issue with that, it's their problem. Does that make sense? But yes, in the early days, but that's reflected on me. It was more the fact that I felt I had more to prove, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
and as I've gone on, maybe I've just got older as well. I don't care.
No,
just don't care.
I had somebody last week or the week before comment on a video which was 5 years old, and it's about a little metal sharpening jig that you use for leather beveling tools. So essentially it's a bit of metal with some peaks on it, put a bit of sandpaper on it and use it to sharpen your tools, just a little jig. So I was reviewing the jig. I'm reviewing the jig, this is what it's looking at, it's a 3-minute video, it's a really cool bit, it's just come out, let's have a look at it. Yep, done. Yeah, this is it. It's not very sharp, you can see me beveling some leather, strop it up a little bit, bevel it, oh, it's much sharper. And somebody recently from a 4 or 5 year old video went, that could be sharper. Yeah, you're right, it could be. It could be duller as well. The point of it was, thanks for the view. Thanks for sitting through the whole video and getting my view count up. Brilliant. But also, grow up. Like, it says jig review. It's not, look how sharp I can get this tool. I know I can get it sharper. That's not what I'm showing you. I'm showing you that this tool does this thing. And it's that, bring me the hate, it's fine. You can hate as much as you want. Just watch the video all the way through with the volume turned up, because otherwise it don't count. Then that's it. And it's like what you're saying, like you get a little bit older and you go, I don't care.
Usually a comment reflects more on the other person
100%.
than it does on yourself.
In
And I
this case
also,
especially.
if someone is writing paragraphs to you, you just think, oh, I'd love to have that time. That's great. Like, how lucky are you to have that much time to spend that sending me that email?
I wish I was that passionate about someone else's thing, to be honest. Yeah.
I made a conscious choice in my last video to share comments of people mocking my disability.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think I've seen that.
And that's like, do you know what I mean? You know, you just think, there was some of them, and 4 out of 5. So I have a stock answer, because people parachute into the channel sometimes. So they've seen a short, they see you using a panel carrier, and then they make some crude comments about you, whatever. So I have a stock, they say, I lost the use of my right arm 7 years ago in a car crash. That's what I just reply with, if I bother to reply to them. 4 out of 5 will reply going, I'm really sorry, mate, I didn't realise, okay? Which you go, I don't want to take it any further, because I could go, okay, but why did you bother making the comment in the first place? 1 out of 5, or maybe 1 out of 10, all double down. Because they can't be wrong. There's some people who can't be wrong. So then you get well, you don't look disabled. Or you get these like, well, I won't go into too much. So and you think, mate, what are you doing? You know what I mean? Why are you even... there's some of them, and I think it was in the last vlog video. The bit I struggle to get my head around is, why do people even bother to take the time? When they press the send, how are they feeling? Do they feel better that they have mocked a bloke with a disability? You know what I mean? Because
I'd say unlikely.
You know,
It's always the people
that's where are we going with that one? Like, where's the world going with that one?
The people that leave these comments are the people that would never do this in person. It's always hidden behind the keyboard.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah, because you just think, if something like that happened in the real world, the consequences of that would be different, wouldn't they?
Yes.
But in the virtual world, it seemed to be it's governed by a different set of ethics and laws and rules or whatever.
Well, there's a mental
isn't
health.
really, but,
there's a mental health angle on both sides of that, isn't there? There's the one of the recipient of that negative comment, and that's a relatively simple one for most people to understand. It's not nice when people say not nice things. That's not hard to get your head around.
Yeah.
Sometimes those things can really get under your skin, but fundamentally that's a simple concept. But there's also and very difficult to, for us, I would think, to imagine what it must be like, because I don't think we're the kind of people to leave those kind of comments. But the other side of that coin will be the person leaving the comment, chances are they're going through their own stuff. And that's why they're leaving such weird, inhuman negative comments, because they clearly can't be in the right mental space unless they're just fundamentally evil, which is unlikely in my experience. So, just a nugget.
However, on the flip side of the comment stuff, lots of people leave really nice comments.
Yeah.
And it makes you feel good when you see them.
Yeah.
I think so, but I do often think that it can be the negative ones you remember. You can
yeah,
get 10 great
yeah.
comments and it's the negative one. And I think that's a really interesting thing. And one of the things that I try and do when I'm like, oh, this is to go back and be like, actually, no, the nice comments hit differently.
Actively soak in
You're absolutely
huge, overwhelming positivity. Yeah, definitely.
The overwhelming, to go back to that, the overwhelming amount of comments I receive is incredibly supportive. Absolutely amazing. The following, even from the early days, people that have been with us, has been incredible. And it's not my turn of phrase, but it's called like the Amazon review syndrome, isn't it? That you're looking at a product and it's got 100 5-star reviews, and there's one Muppet who's left a 1-star review saying it broke on the second go or whatever, and you remember that one. And
bigger
you don't
than
buy
expected, or smaller than it looked in the. Well, you clearly didn't look at the description.
Exactly. And it's the negative ones that, unfortunately, because we're only human, you know what I mean, and that's the way sometimes we're conditioned, don't we? That you remembered some of the horrible ones, and you sometimes forget about the unbelievable positivity you get from That's,
I think that's actually, just very quickly, and we'll move on, but very quickly on that, for anyone who's putting out content and is struggling or worrying with any comments or anything that I might be getting, it's unfortunate as well that the Amazon review bias goes even more extreme, in that, of course, 99% of people don't comment at all. Yeah. I don't know what the stats actually are. It's probably more than that. And the vast, if not the entire majority of those people that don't, who watched and don't comment, probably also liked it.
Exactly.
And so it's not only that the few people that liked it and commented, that's 10 to 1 of the negative. You've also then got the other 90 people out of those 100 that if you were to force them all to comment, actually your ratio is probably more like 98 to 2 in terms of positive to negative. But you don't see that. So just try and remember that. If you're putting something out, if you're trying to get into making content, that it's not even good enough to analyze the few people that have made the effort to comment, because in reality, how often do you do that? You need to trust that it's the absolute overwhelming majority of people are probably liking what you do. They just didn't mention it. It's not. It can be quite a comforting thought.
So I think we've touched on quite a lot of points here, all the way from sort of personal mental health problems before creating and the effects of what we love doing. I think we've got enough time left for some questions. If anyone feels open enough to ask, there'll be a mic going round if anyone...
Yeah, we've got a
there's
couple
one
down here, yeah. Here we go.
With the advent of powerful AI and language models and so on, would you want to see a tool in YouTube where you'd have unconstructive criticism, needless rubbish, filtered out, if you were able to choose to do that?
You can block keywords. You can block certain words and phrases. Not lots of us on YouTube in particular have a very long block list of things that can't be commented or will be. The best feature as well is the hide feature, because that person doesn't know you've hidden that comment. They think it's still there, that no one's interacting with it, but you know it's not there, and that is my favorite feature, hide.
I have a question. Does anybody here feel like they've ever been shadow banned from a channel or a Facebook page? If you have, you've probably said something really, really inappropriate. Don't do that. Be nice. Just as a comment.
Oh, is that what that is?
Yeah.
Noted.
Sorry, you asked the question. We didn't actually answer your question. Sorry.
I mean, so specifically, I would say, and that's a whole conversation about AI and censorship and stuff. You could unravel there. I wouldn't want that to be something specifically on YouTube that is enforced across the board. But a tick box that you could potentially, as a creator, say yes to as a filter, that would make sense to me. So that if you wanted to, as AI models got smarter and smarter, filter those things up. Yeah, makes sense. And I'd say chances are we'll get that in over the next few years. We'll get smarter and smarter. Certainly not as a complete blanket thing, because I would also like the option to, see everything. But yeah.
And the other thing, negative comments aren't always hateful. Some of them are, oh, it'd be better if you did this. Yeah, you're right. That's really constructive criticism. Thank you for the feedback.
Yeah.
I'm going to do that next time. But and things can be misconstrued when it's written down, right?
They're just more unhelpful. It's just unhelpful comment.
Yes, unhelpful. Well, you get unhelpful and you can just get hate.
And I think it's hard sometimes to distinguish, isn't it? In the sense of if you were to look at the comments for sometimes, with projects, you're like, oh, that's really handy. But you could read that as a negative comment, but it's not a hateful or hurtful comment. And I think sometimes, I don't know if necessarily an AI or someone, do you know what I mean? You can't always distinguish.
Well, it's personal, isn't it? So it can't possibly.
Yeah.
And it's, as you say, constructive criticism or even just a constructive comment. If you've done a thing that's very hard and it didn't go to plan and someone leaves a comment saying, hey, I've done something like that, I think I wouldn't do it the way that you did, I think I'd do it like this. You could choose to perceive that as, well, don't tell me what to do, or you could choose to perceive that as, thanks, mate, really appreciate it. That's obviously an extremely personal thing, and I definitely don't want to live in a world where people don't feel like they can. If I've done a thing wrong in a video, I'm not necessarily against someone telling me, and it's kind of up to me to have thick enough skin and being broad enough in my... and hopefully mentally healthy enough that I can take that on for what it is, which is hopefully not a negative comment, but a constructive bit of feedback. So again, balancing that is an extremely difficult thing to do, and I think we're probably another decade or so away from AI getting that right.
Where my escape zone, if I'm getting stressed or depressed, is to go back into making. If I'm making for myself, there's no deadline, no nothing, and I'm chilled and I'm relaxed. Unfortunately, I make using tech, and you want the latest tech, which costs. So therefore, you have to start making stuff to sell, and you become hypercritical. Your stresses come out because of that. How do you deal with that?
I think that you can only achieve what you can achieve, and some people have much higher expectations of themselves. And if you've got a certain set of equipment, a certain set of tools, I would say just do what you can with what you've got. And if you can't achieve that next step, if you haven't got enough money to afford the next thing, that's when what we've been speaking about, how turning it into a job and trying to manage those things, it gets really difficult. And everyone's different. But I would say just try and keep time for your hobby and time for your business if you do turn it into one.
I was going to say...
Yeah.
Go on.
So here's something my dad said to me. Never let perfect get in the way of done. Do it. Somebody's paid for you to do it to a certain standard. That's their standard, not yours. We can all, I would imagine, pick any one of our projects and find fault with it.
Yeah.
Literally any one. I could go pick one of the things you've made, and you can go, well, I would have done this bit better. Okay, but has it made that person happy? Have you fulfilled the requirement, the contract, whatever it may be? Do not let perfect get in the way of done. And if you're getting things done, you'll get your money, and then you can buy the latest and greatest.
Yeah, laser engraver.
Also, when you're making something to sell, that price, if it's a fixed price, has a limit. Because you could make a box and sell it for a certain amount of money, and is that amount of money right for what you've made? You could dovetail all the corners, engrave it, do all ridiculous things to it. But if this price is set, then it should only really be to that price.
I'd also just very quickly like to add, specifically because I feel like I've got potentially something similar to your experience with tech products and the market moving on and feeling like you need to constantly evolve. My one piece of advice that I'm still learning how to apply is honesty, both with yourself and with customers. It goes both ways. If you are struggling to get something done, obviously if you're a massive corporate company saying, sorry mate, I couldn't get it done because XYZ happened, that doesn't really work. But if you're dealing on an individual basis most of the time, which I am, my company's very, very small, telling that customer the truth, 99% of the time, everyone's so chilled and understanding, and it can be massively more stressful than necessary when you try to present yourself as anything other than human. So if you say, I'm really sorry, I'm struggling with my machine, it's not really working at the moment, I'm trying to get it done, I'll try and get it out on Thursday. Most people come back and say, don't worry, it's not for 3 months anyway, just get it when you can. So just allowing yourself the room to be honest with a customer like that directly, I find really helps with all sorts of things. And the other way goes, being honest with yourself, does this actually matter, really? Like, it's a very difficult thing to do, and again, that's very personal. But does it actually really matter if this goes out in the post before 4 p.m. today, or if it goes in the morning? Is it going to make any difference to the person, or any difference to the universe? Not really. So you can choose to beat yourself up unnecessarily, and it's very easy to get yourself into a mindset. Try and be honest with the customers, and try and be honest with yourself as much as you can.
Manage that expectation across both sides.
You can lose sight quite easily,
That's
especially when you're running a business.
Okay, we've got time for one more, guys.
Have we got it?
Colin's going to be in about a minute.
Okay.
There was another person here. We've got a quick question.
Yeah. So just a quick one. What's the funniest failure you've ever had?
How long you got?
Not long.
1 minute. One
No,
minute.
go on, go on.
Funniest failure was that?
Funniest failure.
I mean, to find funny.
Every
The thing
single
is, it's funny to everyone else except you.
every single build, something goes wrong, and we try and film it. We don't always capture it, but every single time we build something, something goes horribly wrong. And I feel like that's part of the journey. I feel I've got to the point where I feel like embracing the failure has been one of the best things in making.
If you don't laugh, you'll cry.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is not anything like a specific answer, but as a concept to take away is quite important too. Because if you take something having gone wrong straight to heart, and therefore you spiral, and therefore more. I find when something goes wrong and I let it get to my head, then more things go wrong, and I get to my. You can't go down that route.
Nope.
You need to. And I've worked with lots of engineers who really struggle with that, or creators who really struggle with that. Something goes wrong, and they throw all the toys out the pram, and therefore all the toys are out the pram. So now you're really unhappy, and you kind of did that to yourself. So. Just again, trying to have a bit of perspective, be honest with yourself in the situation. It's not a direct answer to your question, but it's again a takeaway that I've had to develop over the last few years.
I don't have failures. I have.
Oh, you're Jimmy B. We did a panel about failure, and James realized I don't fail.
I don't have
I
failures.
plan well.
No, I don't have failures.
You're perfect.
I have no, God no, I mess things up all the time. I have lessons, and sometimes what I might learn is a new way to not do something. Don't cut too close because you've just ruined that, or you've marked that wrong, or you put the die on there and then it tipped over your desk and now you've got a red workbench. That was quite funny, accidentally. When you go to move the camera and you knock a bottle of dye all over your desk. But yeah, I don't fail.
It's more fun than anything else, really, isn't it? Because you can't take anything else constructive from it, so you might as well laugh.
I deleted the video.
Yeah.
I couldn't, and my desktop's still stained red.
That's quite funny.
It's quite funny.
Right, but yeah, thank you, all four of you, for coming up here and talking about some pretty personal things. I think we've basically run out of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, so thank you everyone for listening, and enjoy the rest of your day at Maker Central.
Give it up for our panelists, everyone. Thank you.